It's time I tell you all about my first ever crush. Welcome everyone to Powered and Protected by Rainbows. I am of course your host, Matt Haslam. And before we jump into our episode, first off, if you're one of my family members, please don't watch this episode. But for the rest of you, don't forget to like this video, comment down below your LGBTQ friendly thoughts, and hit that rainbow subscribe button so you don't miss out on new episodes of Season 3. Anyway, it's story time. Around the time I was 11 years old, I was a Boy Scout in Troop 604 out of Port Carbon, PA. And around that time, a group of boys crossed over into the Boy Scout troop I was already in. And while a few of them became my friend, one boy really became my best friend at the time. He also happened to attend the same grade school I attended, called St. Stephen's Regional Catholic Grade School, also in Port Carbon. His name was Alex, and over time, him and I would eat lunch together in school, hang out at recess every day, and we would also hang out in the Boy Scouts together. Alex and I would be the two boys in the front of everyone else in our troop, leading the way on hikes. We'd be the first to build fires on camping trips, and outside of all of that, him and I would hang out as friends. In other words, we were best friends at the time. Now, the thing you should probably know about us is that we both loved physics. So when his mom and dad were taking him to the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, PA, they thankfully invited me to come along. It's amazing how much I remember all these years later, from a day which truly changed my life, and he never even knew it. But I remember the color of his family's car, and even the floral smell inside as we drove to the Science Museum that morning. His dad was driving, his mother was in the passenger seat, and Alex and I were in the back seat together. For a few minutes we were all saying good morning, and I was thanking them for inviting me along. But after that, his mom and dad began talking about financials or whatever adults talked about at the time. I honestly don't remember. But what I do remember is the conversation Alex and I were having about school, Boy Scouts, and how excited we were for the trip that day. But it was a 2-hour-long trip, so about halfway into the drive, we began talking about relationships. And don't ask me why an 11-year-old me and a 10-year-old Alex wanted to talk about relationships, but we did. He asked me if I had my first kiss yet, and I told him the truth that no, I hadn't yet got a first kiss. So I asked him the same question, and the answer was the same as mine. It was around this time when we could start to hear his mother laugh and joke in her British accent to her husband about our young selves asking about a first kiss. But Alex and I kept our own little conversation going anyway. And then Alex asked me when I planned to get a first kiss. Without thinking it over, I quickly replied and told him, today, while we were at the museum, I plan on getting my first ever kiss today. Out of curiosity, he asked me a quick follow-up question and asked me, do you plan on kissing some random stranger down here then? And again, without thinking it over, I replied, no, probably somebody I know. His mother was still laughing her head off at the idea of two 10 and 11-year-old boys talking about their first kisses. But that didn't stop Alex from another follow-up question, asking me if I know of anyone going to be down at the museum who we might meet down there. And I sadly didn't know of anyone else going to the museum that day. And that's the answer which stopped his mom from laughing so hard. She turned back to us and looked at me for a second, and then quickly restarted her conversation with her husband and kept her eyes on the road. Now, the one thing I didn't tell you in the beginning of this story was that for the month or so after he invited me to go to the museum with his family, up until the day we actually went, I pictured that day a million times in my dreams. Each time the day ended with Alex giving me a kiss. Sometimes in my dreams it was on my front porch after the whole day was over. Other times that first kiss was at the museum, when we snuck away from his family into an exhibit. But it was far from the first time I dreamt of kissing him or starting a relationship with him. When we'd hang out, I would laugh a little more at his jokes. I'd dream of the day we would hold hands on one of our hikes in the Boy Scouts together. I'd picture our forbidden love being Catholic schoolboys, but running away to whichever city we chose to run away to together someday. And I know, it might sound stupid for an 11-year-old to dream of the rest of his life, but I couldn't help it. And the worst part was I had no idea why I was dreaming of falling in love with Alex instead of all the pretty girls in our school. The point is, I had no idea at the time what being gay was, because we were never taught how love worked like that. All I heard in class at school about liking someone of the same sex was how wrong it was, even though I know that to be completely false nowadays. If you're asking, I never got my first kiss that day, but I still remember that look in his mother's eyes when she turned back and stared at me for a few seconds, because she was old enough to know what I meant in my answers to Alex's first kiss questions. But she never prevented me from hanging out with him after that, even though she could see clear as day that I was attracted to her son. Later that year, we went to the summer camp together, which is a 7-day-long adventure, where your whole troop goes camping with dozens of other troops from across the state and learns different skills. And to be honest, a lot of kids made fun of those lessons we were being taught and didn't pay attention. But still to this day, I tie knots and use a lot of those skills when filmmaking and rigging equipment for my day job. But that year, it was 7 whole days spent close to Alex, so that was a massive plus in my mind. Summer camp was an annual thing, and it happened to fall on the same week of my July 3rd birthday every year. So my birthday present to myself every year was spending 7 days at a camp with hundreds of other guys, and now Alex too. But eventually, I got extremely mad at myself for liking Alex so much. At the time, I didn't understand why I wanted to hold his hand, or why I wanted to kiss him. And that caused me to try to hide, not just my romantic feelings, but hide every emotion from everyone I knew. And unless you've gone through it yourself, you don't know how angry you get at yourself for trying to hide so much of your personality from everyone. A couple of years went by going to summer camp and taking almost every merit badge class Alex took just to sit next to him, and so I can walk around camp with him. And here's where I have to remind you that I was now 13 years old in this story, and everyone else at the camp that year was around the same age. But I'll admit that year at summer camp when I was 13 was the first time I happened to see another boy my same age in the shower lockers. Completely, well, you know. But he was from another troop, also at summer camp that year. So that year when I came home from summer camp, I spent the whole next day angry at myself and crying. Why did I like other boys so much? And why did I never in a million years want to see a girl the same way? Why didn't I want to hold a girl's hand instead of Alex's? I was so angry at myself that I just decided to run away, up into the hill and the woods behind our house at the time. But that's how I always dealt with my problems at the time. When my parents were fighting, I hid up on the hill behind our house and walked around the trails for hours on end until I thought it would be safe enough to come home again. In other words, my family knew where I was, and they knew I was dealing with something in my own way. But I had enough, and so I decided to take out my pocket knife and carve Alex's name into the side of a tree. There was no heart around his name, and for all anyone else knew, Alex could have been a girl's name. But to me, I had to finally stop being so upset at myself about being gay without knowing what being gay meant. And that tree in the middle of a forest became the only spot in the world I could stop being so angry at myself. Back then, our elementary school also had a school council fundraiser every year for Valentine's Day, where you can send a rose or a candy to someone else in school for just $1. And while I sent one to my sister every year, I also sent one anonymously to Alex, which was labeled from his secret admirer. I was hoping maybe one day he would put 2 and 2 together, or maybe recognize my handwriting one day, but he never did. In fact, he only found out those Valentines were from me many years later in a song I wrote for him, telling him that I'm out of the closet now and I'm happier than I've ever been. It took me more than 10 years after that to tell the first person in the world that I was gay. And so nowadays when I host shows like this one, you might wonder why I host them, or why I fight so hard for LGBTQ rights. But this story is the exact reason why. And I think it was finally time to tell you that story. I know there are lots of kids out there right now who go through similar things and are first seeing these signs of being LGBTQ. You may not understand these signs right now, and you may not even know what being gay, bisexual, or pansexual means. But one day you will, so I wanted to share my story, so you can maybe stop being so angry at yourself, and so you can stop being so hard on yourself for being who you were always meant to be. As for Alex, well, he is now happily married, and I'm fairly certain is planning to start a family someday soon. Honestly, he looks happier than ever in photos with his wife, and I wish him the best. But I can't help but feel like my coming out process might not have taken so long if I was taught how being gay is perfectly fine, and if I was allowed to send those Valentines without disguising them from a secret admirer. Perhaps my first kiss still wouldn't have been with Alex, but maybe my childhood would have been easier knowing my feelings for him back then were perfectly healthy to have. As Thomas Lloyd once said, it's easier to change a society than to change your own identity, and it does much less damage that way. So go ahead and change the world around you and let them accept you for being who you are. But please, never try to change yourself from being LGBTQ. It just won't work, and you'll just get mad at yourself for it not working. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Powered by Rainbows. If you liked it and want to support more content like this, please consider pledging to our Patreon page, where you can get a ton of benefits. Just go to patreon.com/MHPTV or click the link in the description. Don't forget to like this video, share your LGBTQ friendly thoughts in the comments, hit that rainbow subscribe button so you don't miss out on new episodes of our show, and share this video with others. I'm your host, Matt Haslam. This has been PBR, and have a gay day, everyone. Bye for now. Watch Powered by Rainbows Season 3, only on MHPTV.